I was gonna write an intro about how much I love X-Men, but like, you already know that. I mean, everyone loves X-Men. You may think you don't, but you just don't know it yet, and that's okay. With this pitch for the first MCU X-Men movie, I strive to create a story that fully encapsulates what makes the X-Men so special. Their amazing visuals, fantastic characters that never stop growing, an enriched, fantastic world, the empowerment that they can bring to so many people, the non-stop creativity, enjoyable antagonists, stories with something to say, and so much more. The X-Men mean a lot to me and are my second favorite or favorite team in all comics. I'm dying for a new solo movie with all these folks that truly respects everything they are. It would be less challenging and more open to just start fresh in an alternate universe. I think there is still some potential in setting this saga in the MCU. Writing this movie was a challenge to me because I wanted to explain the history of X-Men while also setting up their future, but not getting too bogged down in either to not have a fun standalone adventure. I recommend watching my Kitty Pryde movie pitch before this, just in case you want 100% context for small details in this pitch, but I will still be able to clear everything up just fine. Have fun, enjoy, and I would really like to hear your feedback on this one, as it will be a determining factor for upcoming videos. Smart thing to say right now would be, hey, like the video and subscribe and give me $1 million, which like I hate doing. But when it's something I want to be shared as much as this, I want to make an exception. So whatever you want to help this video in the algorithm or share it with other X-Men mega fans you know. But now, it is really time to get into my pitch for the first MCU X-Men movie, entitled UNCANNY X-Men. We open in the late evening, transitioning into nighttime. We see the surroundings of a rowdy bar as the text reads, Boston, Massachusetts, 2000. We single in this one lonely man at the bar, looking around. The lonely parts of him want to go talk to those around him, make new friends, enjoy life, but his instincts force him to stay still and by himself as the bartender hands him another drink. After Eric receives the drink, he looks over to see someone getting upset at losing a chess game as the victor is smiling and laughing. The bartender tells Eric how that is their local chess master and explains that if someone beats them, then he'll pay for everyone's drinks. Bartender keeps trying to convince him to give it a try, pointing out how Eric comes here every Friday night with the same lonely expression and all the industrial gruff around him. Eventually, Eric caves in and goes to the chess master Charles. They introduce themselves to each other, and we focus on their different plays as Charles points out Eric's accent. Eric explains that he was born in Germany, but spent most of his life in Poland until moving to the Americas. Charles says that he is in a similar boat to being born in the United Kingdom, but eventually moved over to the United States in order to see the world. Charles then blurts out, I'm sorry what they did to you. It wasn't your fault. Eric gets up from his seat into a defensive position as the others in the bar start to fade away, showing them as an illusion Charles put in his head. The bartender stays, but shapeshifts back into her normal mystique form, and Charles introduces her as his sister. They then both explain that they've read up on Eric, or as they call him, Max. They explain that they know he was taken in by Nazis after they discovered his powers and kept them as their little weapon. Max explains that they made him kill people. They turned him into a monster. Raven says not to believe what they forced you to be, but Eric further explains it doesn't matter. When S.H.I.E.L.D. saved me, I killed all of them just because I didn't know better. And I didn't know who I was. Before Eric can finish, Charles walks up to him, holds his forehead to his, as we start hearing echoes of all of Eric's experiences. Once Eric sits down and Charles walks back, he says that he knows all the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that would want to come after him, and with his permission, they can wipe their mind and provide a life where Eric can truly start fresh. Eric thinks about this for a bit, then asks what it is they really want. Charles says that he has a feeling that mutants won't stop coming, and he wants to work with Eric and Raven to create a safe haven future, saying these young mutants will need mentors that we never had. Eric finally starts to smile, as we start to hear a leitmotif of the X-Men theme. Now we can either do two things here, have the normal MCU intro but with the X-Men theme in the background, or, my preferred opinion, a Raimi Spider-Man style opening credits sequence that plays over paintings or photos depicting the events from these X-Men's past. We'd see a Scott Summers that accidentally destroys part of his orphanage before ending up in the warm support of Charles. That Scott then meets a high school sweetheart within Jean, and we see different training moments of the first class as we see a photo of Scott, Jean, Beast, Storm, Angel, Havoc, Eric, and Raven together. We then start seeing flashes of chaos. That first class photo is torn apart. We see flashes of Phoenix energy collapsing until we fade into the sorrowful sight of a gravestone belonging to Jean Grey. We then fade back into the first class photo, but now with Havoc, Eric, Raven, and Jean blocked out. We transition back into present-day New Hampshire as the X-Jet flies over the cloudy views of the snowy mountains. Cyclops and Beast pilot the ship while looking at the thermal readings of the mutants on the mountain. As they try to come up with a plan, we are introduced to Angel, Gambit, and Psylocke. I really want this to feel like a family dynamic, similar to how the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 acted in the opening of that film. You can definitely tell the difference between the 3 remaining members of the first class interacting versus how they treat the newbies like Gambit and Psylocke. They play around, and Remy tries to get on Scott's nerve, but never takes the joke too far. Scott tries to get Remy to focus as he starts getting serious.
The professor said he felt the pain of 2 young mutants, but they wouldn't fully let him get into their minds.
Hang on just a second. You still call Charles the professor? I didn't realize we need to be all formal and such.
Not the point, Remy.
As they get closer to the snowstorm, Hank notices that it's starting to mess up the screen on the jet. Scott hangs on the edge of the outside of the jet as we start seeing through the lens of his visor. Through the red tint, we see a young boy floating in the wind of snow and ice as an older young adult stands next to him and holds him.
Warren, fly over and get an overview. Anon, land with me and try to get a read on the girl while I distract her. Hank and Remy, get the boy to the jet. Then, if needed, help disable the girl. Understood?
The team nods and gets into their positions.
To me, my X-Men.
Scott and Psylocke land in front of the woman, revealed to be Rogue. Scott tries to use his words to calm her down, but she just smiles before mocking the X-Men I've heard so much about. She then flies towards Scott and kisses him until he is drained enough, and she throws his body at Quenon. Rogue then notices Remy and Beast trying to take Bobby and shoots an icy blast out of her eyes. Remy then uses his kinetic energy to melt the ice off of him, and Beast fastball specials him into a solo fight with Rogue. Angel flies Bobby Iceman into the jet and starts to pilot it down to get Hank. Hank helps get Bobby set up in the medbase as he urges Warren to find Scott and Quenon. We see Quenon and Scott barely hanging on to the edge of the mountain as one of the blasts from the fight pushes them off. Quenon tries to awaken Scott until she's able to get close enough to send a telepathic blast waking him up. Warren then catches Quenon, and Scott is able to blast his way down to safety in homage to X-Men 97. We cut back to the tussle between Gambit and Rogue as they tease each other until Rogue gets the advantage. Rogue takes off her gloves in order to drain Gambit's power, but he starts producing enough kinetic energy to stay conscious enough until Angel flies in with Quenon and she goes inside her mind. We see flashes of Rogue's life, being abused by her drunk father, falling in love, her kiss that paralyzed her boyfriend, and being taken in by Mystique. After finally being able to put Rogue to sleep, we cut to the team back in the X-Jet. Scott is flying the jet and giving an overview to Charles as Warren helps Beast hook up Bobby and Rogue to the medbase. He asks Hank about how far he is in the new serum to temporarily remove his wings. Hank tries to brush past this, but Warren says he needs this, as later he'll be having a family gathering. When his parents found out the first time it didn't go so well, Charles had to erase that from their mind and he doesn't want to go through that again. Hank says that these types of serums are risky and in most cases just make the mutation stronger and stronger. Hank then tells the stories of how he tried to erase his mutations, just made it worse. He would love for Warren to start trying to change his appearance based on what he wants, not about what he thinks society will want. What makes you think that I would want this curse? We then cut to Remy and Quenon cleaning up each other's wounds, and Remy said that she did good. He looks over at Rogue and asks her what's in her mind. Someone tells him about the flashes, says that she doesn't know how to tell the others that they have a lead on their old pal Raven. This thing causes Remy to ponder before asking,
I wonder what it was like with all them before, well...
The X-Jet then flies into the mansion as Charles wheels in to exclaim his welcomes to the X-Men. We cut to East Kenya as we are introduced to Storm helping out the community at worship her as she goes to recollect herself in her room. She is shocked and defensive to see Magneto in there. He tries to reassure her that he means no harm, is only here to check up on her. He walks around the room and chuckles that it was not easy to find her. This is what you've built here. It is truly beautiful, inspiring peace and those that look up to you, giving them a better life. Tell me this. Were you actually doing it to help these pathetic beings or for yourself? Listen here, Aurora. You are one of the most talented mutants we have, and I hate to see your efforts go towards these pests. You don't dare go anywhere near them. They are good. It doesn't matter. Eventually they all become the same. You should know, as you have experienced the same hardships of the hands of the species that I have. And that is why I've come for you. There is a war on its way, and I would like you to fight it with us. I have seen what happens when humans have to face a new competitor, and I will not let it happen again. There is no stopping what's about to happen, and you need to pick a side. So, what do you say, Aurora? Storm talks about how she's given up the life of the battle and only wants to protect her community. Well, you are stiff in your position, and I respect that. But you need to understand, I cannot risk someone like Charles getting his hands on you in this war. So unfortunately, I'll have to make sure that you can't, for the greater good of mutant kind. Magneto then flings all the metal towards her as they fly in the air while having a tussle. She mainly focuses on getting her people to safety as Eric keeps going after her. As it seems Aurora might be able to get an upper hand, the rest of the Brotherhood shows up. As she gets back out to continue fighting, she sees the Brotherhood doing the same. Knowing she can't defeat them alone, soars away across the sky and ocean. We cut back to the X-Mansion as each member recollects themselves in their rooms, besides Remy, who stays with Charles in order to keep an eye on the unconscious Bobby and Rogue. Starting with Warren, who is on a call with his high-class family. They ask him about how his work is going, and they say how they miss him. He continues by making small talk with them, starts looking through old family photos as he reflects on how his family life was stripped away from him, then starts crying after the call ends. Hank comes into his room, gives Warren the new serum he stored up, but tries to warn him about the dangers of hiding yourself. We then pan into Scott's room as he changes out of his suit, then tries to take a nap. In the nap, he keeps seeing flashes of PTSD flashbacks to Jean's death until Psylocke wakes him up to check on him. He says that he doesn't need her help and doesn't want her in his mind. Kenwan tries to empathize with him, but he doesn't want to hear it and just keeps trying to shut her down, saying she has no idea what it was like that day. Listen here, Scott. I understand what you've gone through, and I am sorry for you. I really am. But you cannot take that out on the rest of the team by trying to avoid it. And don't you dare give me that bullshit saying I have no idea what it's like. I had to hold my child in my arms as they died. Humans may never accept us unless we're weapons, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to reach out. Listen, me and Remy have been talking. I know we are new, but we don't think Charles knows what's best for us. Scott tries to defend Charles, but Kenwan points out Scott's daddy issues, while trying to explain that she thinks Charles is more focused on isolation rather than a true future for mutants, and she doesn't want the X-Men's past failures to continue negatively affecting their future. They continue arguing, but right as Kenwan is about to explain that she saw Mystique in Rogue's mind, the X-Men are called back down to the medbase after Rogue is awoken. They come down to see Rogue getting defensive as Gambit calms her down. She then starts looking around and laughing. Charles asks what her and Bobby were doing. You and your false politeness. I know you already read my mind, so stop trying to be a nice guy and get to the point. You know, Eric and Raven warned me about your trickery. Scott asks Charles what Eric and Raven are up to, and he responds by saying he hasn't gotten to that part yet. He looks at Rogue for answers. Eric and my ma wanted me and Bobby to get your attention alongside finding out your new location. Now, just give me back my phone and let me bring them here. They just want to talk. Suddenly the lights flicker and Storm appears. I need Aurora to feel like a goddess here, as you feel that staggering aura that shuts up everyone else in the mansion. Some of them, such as Warren and or Scott, should get emotional in seeing her again, as some of the team members try to welcome her back, but she's not up for small talk, and warns them about her encounter with the Brotherhood of Mutants. Rogue says that she heard about the fantastical Storm, and she's a big fan, but Storm brushes it off. Charles looks around for a bit before coming up with a plan. It's clear the Brotherhood has some sort of motive founded in genuine fear. We cannot let that fear turn into rage that harms us. All of us on the planet. Rogue, you may want to play games and leaking information, but we want to help you. Mutant kind is only as good as the community of mutual beneficent. Rogue, I beg you, please let me contact Eric. I need to have a private conversation. Tell him to meet me at our bar. Warren, I'd like you to come with me. Hank, stay back with Bobby until he wakes up and keep the mansion safe. The rest of you will be led by Storm and Scott, as Rogue shows you where to meet up with the Brotherhood. After some back and forth, the team eventually agrees to this plan, as Scott, Aurora, Remy, Rogue, and Quentin get into the X-Jet, and Rogue gives them coordinates to follow. As the jet takes off, Scott and Storm eventually catch up. She says that it looks like he's led a great team, and that Jean would be proud. She further expands by explaining that she didn't want to abandon her family, but couldn't stay there without feeling like she was eternally poisoning herself. She finishes by stating that Charles makes one hell of a speech, but his arrogance can only take the X-Men so far before it ends in another tragedy. In the back of the jet, Remy, Rogue, and Psylocke get to talking. Remy tries complimenting Rogue's amazing melee skills, and she agrees in a very passive-aggressive way. After Remy realizes that flattery can only take him so far, he tries to smoothly transition to asking her about her story. She initially tries to angrily brush him off, but then is more open to him after he starts explaining his origins. He gets vulnerable as he talks about being raised in the Thieves Guild, only ever being loved due to his power, having to do missions for them which resulted in bad things happening to people. He even mentions that he ran into Canon a couple times during her assassin era. But eventually he fell in love with a girl from the gang that the Thieves Girls didn't approve of, and it ended up in a tragedy. He goes on saying everyone in the X-Men is there because they lost someone or something, and this family is a way to recapture it. Rogue ponders on these statements, then starts empathizing with Remy. She tells him about her own doomed romance, the way her powers came in during the worst time and ended up putting her lover in a coma. Her father tried to shelter her, but her mom saved her and brought her to the Brotherhood. Remy and Quentin reflect on this. Then Remy holds out his gloved hand, which she debates holding, but eventually decides to turn away. Regardless, Remy grins to himself as he rushes away a single tear. We cut back to the X-Mansion. As Bobby wakes up, he walks around the lonely mansion for a bit until he runs into Hank, who is testing out new gadgets while listening to old-timey music. He is initially scared by Hank's beastly appearance, but the warm side of Hank eventually warms up to him. Beast catches Bobby up on everything he missed, and he gives him a cup of hot chocolate while complimenting Bobby's DNA, which he has been analyzing.
Well, that's certainly the most interesting compliment I've ever gotten.
Hank continues to make charming small talk with his new companion, questions Bobby about his history with his mutants alongside how he ended up with the Brotherhood. Bobby tells Hank about how he ran away from his parents after his powers got activated.
I mean, after all, they never accepted the fact that I was gay, so I knew there'd be no world where they'd allow to have a son that's even more of a freak.
Listen here, boy. You are not a freak. The ones that cannot accept their own son, their own beautiful creation, are the epitome of fear found in human nature. I promise you, you are not alone, and you will find more like you. Take it from someone like me. Bobby tears up and hugs Hank, and pan out of the mansion. Warren pulls up the car to the bar, where through the window they see Eric waiting. Warren double checks if Charles really wants to do this, which Charles confirms. Warren wheels up Charles to the bar and sits behind him as they start small talk with Eric. Just get to the point, Charles. I came here in good faith. Prove me right. Charles responds by blatantly asking him what the goal of the Brotherhood is, alongside why they sent out Rogue and Bobby as the rest attack Storm. After the utter failure of the X-Men, me and Raven knew that mutant kind needed something stronger. So we rescued many mutants before your pathetic morals could. And now, more than ever, is the time to reveal ourselves to humanity. And I won't let you make them forget about us again. I know you probably see me as the villain, as you only want us to be sheltered, but we can't hide anymore. He is back and is taking young mutants. We need to stop him before he can take anyone else. Contrary to what you might believe, we want your help, not your opposition. Charles and Warren are in shock, and as they are about to ask more questions, something from under the ground takes away Charles' wheelchair, causing him to fall on the floor. Warren and Eric get into a defensive position, as Warren tells Eric that his powers are currently inactive due to the serum. Oh, you coward, hiding your most prized possession. As more and more civilians from the bar come up to see what's happening, Charles yells to get back, stating that he feels the mind running through the place. Their minds are broken and not in control. A mysteriously clothed yellow and blue mutant breaks through the walls as she knocks out all the bystanders. It is revealed to be Laura Wolverine alongside Kitty Pryde. Only both of them have red diamonds on their forehead alongside glowing red eyes. Charles attempts to look in their minds, but only sees the darkness of Sinister that causes him immense pain. Warren tries to get Charles back in the car as Kitty launches towards them and quickly knocks both of them out in a brawl. Meanwhile, Laura attempts to lunge at Eric, but he easily uses her adamantium skeleton against her, making it so she cannot get a single hit on him. After Laura's defeat, Kitty lunges out towards Eric. As he's about to fight back, he sees the Starry David necklace hanging off her neck, and we see a slow motion shot while we hear distorted sounds of Eric's tragic origin. Never again. All the metal starts flying everywhere as the cops show up to neutralize the mutants, which just angers Eric even more as he flings them back. He then pins Laura to the ground and looks deep into her glowing red eyes. "Show yourself, coward!" Then, as if he has been a shadow lurking in the background the whole time, Mr. Sinister rises out of the ground. "I should have known you would be so strong, my boy. Out of all the men I've created, you are certainly my favorite." Before he can finish, Magneto tries to fight back against him, but Sinister is able to knock out Eric without breaking a sweat. Laura and Kitty bring the unconscious Charles and Warren, and they teleport away as we view the destruction caused during this brawl. We then transition to an asleep Rogue waking up after the jet lands on the base of the Brotherhood. Eventually, everyone gets out to see the rough nature of being in hiding, yet the clear respect for trying to protect each other. Rogue immediately goes to hug Mystique. Aurora and Scott then go to Raven, with Aurora commenting, "I hope you're in a better mood. We come here for peace and not the harsh violence you attempted on me. We needed to get your attention somehow, and I do want to say I'm proud of how strong you've become. We've trained you well." Scott tries to cut off this moment by getting to the point, asking them what her Brotherhood wants. Mystique responds by saying it all has to do with her, gesturing to an Emma Frost that appears in frame. Mr. Sinister is back, and we believe his new plan could hurt even more mutants. Scott takes a deep breath in before telling Remy and Psylocke to go with the rest of the Brotherhood as Aurora and him talk to Raven. We cut to the two of them in the main part of the Brotherhood base as they make small talk, with Pyro and Gambit constantly arguing their snarky attitude. Eventually, Psylocke tries to cut to the point and asks Emma who she is and what she has to do with Sinister. We then enter a scene that slices between Raven explaining this new threat to Scott and Aurora, alongside the dialogue that comes from Emma explaining her side of the story. This is also where she can explain who Mr. Sinister is in order to fill in Remy and Kenon, since I imagine the rest of the X-Men would be too traumatized to talk about him, but mainly in order to give exposition to the audience. We've shown the story of how Sinister is a scientist from the 19th century, obsessed with the idea of evolution and the idea of creating a perfect being. During his time, him and his team tried to find out the mysteries of how to populate mutants, but the technology of his time just wasn't ready. So he went into an ice slumber and awoke for 1 year every decade in order to slowly advance his technology. They then eventually purchased his prized possession, Magneto. He made Magneto his agent, treating him more and more powerful until he was able to escape. The torment continued until he killed Jean Grey and the X-Men were torn apart. Only one of his clones has awakened, going after all the mutants, with a plan more dangerous than they could ever imagine. Remy interrupts, asking how Emma knows all this. She says that a couple months ago, she befriended a new mutant named Kitty Pryde, a friend that showed her love for the first time in her life. They were requested help from a new mutant that had recently escaped a lab, a mutant that goes by Wolverine. This Wolverine recently escaped one of Sinister's lab experiments and brought Katie and Emma to help her take him down. Only when they finally tracked him down, he was able to overpower them, and now is using Kitty and Laura's minds as his puppets. Emma continues on, stating that the only reason she was able to get away is due to her telepathy. But after the encounter with Sinister, that side of her mutant power doesn't work anymore. We then cut back to Scott, Aurora, and Raven, as Raven explains what Sinister is planning. He's finally created a culmination of all his work over the centuries of living, a machine that he has implanted in his head that will allow him to track down every creature with mutant genes. And the only thing he needs left is a brain strong enough to emerge with it. The realization of this news freaks Scott out and attempts to call Charles and Warren, trying to seek their whereabouts. Cut back to the rest of the Brotherhood, where Emma attempts to pull Remy and Quenon aside. The rest of the Brotherhood attempts to get in between them, as if they're trying to silence Emma. In the middle of this chaos, Mr. Sinister appears in a dramatic fashion. Cyclops immediately unleashes a massive blast of energy alongside Storm, who uses her lightning to give the blast extra strength. Sinister just laughs as he rejects any of the pain. Scott attempts to shoot another blast, but when he looks at Sinister, all he can see is flashes of Jean. Sinister then continues his fight as a mind-controlled Angel, Wolverine, and Shadowcat appears in order to deal with the rest. Gambit, Emma, and Quinnon notice an injured kid, which can be whatever throwaway mutant we want him to be, it really doesn't matter who this kid is, and attempt to save him, but Pyro uses this as an opportunity to light a fire around the four and trap them in order to escape. The Brotherhood tries to run away, but Rogue pulls away and instead goes to save Remy and the others. Meanwhile, Remy asks Emma for context about what the Brotherhood is hiding. Emma explains that they have a plan to rewire Sinister's technology in order to harm humanity. I never really saw the point of giving pity in those who didn't accept me until Kitty showed me what it meant to have humanity. Even if I don't know what our future holds, I cannot let her down by failing to protect them. Remy and Quinnon smile as they inspired by these words. This sentimental moment is interrupted by Kitty Pryde attacking. Every time Quinnon attempts to touch her with the telepathic energy, Kitty just phases. Rogue then joins in the battle to give some hope and protect the unconscious kid. Where Laura is dealing with the other members of the Brotherhood, this is where we can get a fight between her and Sabretooth, while Angel specifically battles his old mentor of Mystique. Quinnon asks Rogue to use her powers to tame down Kitty, but Rogue responds with fear. She doesn't want to hurt Kitty. Gambit then remembers this moment when they first fought, and he was able to use his kinetic energy in order to balance out Rogue's powers, and he takes off both their gloves and says to take his hand. In order to make sure Kitty is unharmed, Rogue looks at her bare hands for a moment, then looks at Remy's, and gets scared at the idea of physical touch until she eventually accepts it in order to save Kitty. While holding Gambit's hand full of kinetic energy, she absorbs part of Kitty for a bit until Psylocke comes in and uses a blade fused with telepathic power in order to slash the red diamond out of Kitty. Kitty falls back into Emma's arms, who gives her an embraceful hug. The only thing that Kitty mutters before falling unconscious is, "Save Laura." We also see Remy insist that he's fine, even though he can no longer move his arm. The girls discuss how they are going to save Laura. Emma gets terrified at the notion of fighting Sinister. They agree to escape on the X-Jet. Rogue flies Remy, Kitty, and the other unspecified mutant to the med base on the X-Jet, while Psylocke and Emma join in on the fight against Wolverine right after she defeats Sabretooth. We then cut back to Cyclops and Storm attempting to take down Sinister until he uses a blast of telepathic powers to trap them in their nightmares. The camera shifts into the distorted worldview as we see Storm back in that night that killed her parents. Every time she tries to use her powers to stop the rumble from falling, it just destroys more stuff until she's left in a forever shrinking hole that she cannot crawl out of. Then with Cyclops, his nightmare is an extended version of his PTSD flashback, where Sinister keeps using Jean as a puppet to kill all the X-Men. When both of them succumb to their fears and pass out, Sinister just simply snaps his fingers and teleports them away. His diamond then shines as he feels Kitty's consciousness breaking away from him, and he goes to make sure the same doesn't happen to Laura. The Brotherhood is initially shocked and scared to see Psylocke and Emma back despite their attempts to silence them, but then accepts their help in battle that shows how strong Wolverine can be when she's only focused on pure animalistic anger. Toad attempts to help out Mystique bring Angel to the ground. They're eventually able to do so due to Mystique's combat skills and Toad's agility. Warren ends up unconscious on the ground. During all of this chaos, Psylocke puts aside all dangerous emotions she could be feeling. It goes back to her roots as a Japanese assassin in order to have a sword battle with Laura's claws. Once Quinnon is able to get Laura somewhat neutralized, Emma holds her tight with her diamond form, then allows Quinnon's telepathy to break another one of Sinister's diamonds. As they are about to do the same with Warren, Sinister appears next to them and blasts them all away. Mutants, mutants, mutants. What a privilege it must have been to be born this way. I could only dream. You may wonder why I try to make you fear me, or what my ultimate goal is. Well, it's to provide you can draw out the most desperate of fears in the most powerful creatures. Darwin always tried to prove his theory in a time when those religious jealots couldn't fathom, and I wish to do so for the same with the bigots in our universe nowadays. You know, not that long ago, let's say maybe 2-3 decades ago, I ran into this geniusly crazy evolutionary scientist with similar philosophies to me. Granted, he was one of those pests from the stars. He came to Earth in the search for such mild creatures like a raccoon or walrus. He said his sacred mission was to create a perfect society where stuff like bigotry and stupidity could never occur. I believe his intentions were inefficient. We don't need a society. We for sure don't need kindness, being the nature that all living things will never change. And we need to accept that the most powerful will reign supreme as the rest cower away. I dream of finding myself what the most powerful being could be and projecting it onto myself. He then puppets Angel off the ground and simply orders him to say hello to Mummy and be free. Angel's red diamond starts to disappear as he fastly flies away into the distance. Sinister then sinks Mystique, Sabretooth, and Pyro into the floor. Rogue comes in flying with the X-Jet, blasting him with all of the lasers. This gives enough time for the other X-Men to hop onto the jet and fly away, all while Sinister smiles and laughs with joy. We stay in the sky as the camera zooms through where Angel is. As against his will, he flies back into his home city, revealing himself as a winged figure to every citizen there, and eventually crashes into the house with his family. He starts getting PTSD before Charles wiped their minds, and they were terrified of his powers, and he tries to reassure his family despite their terror at seeing his wings. Eventually, when they calm down, Warren feels defeated after his father laments that, "It's okay, Warren. We'll find a way to fix you. Eventually, but we can't let anyone else see you like this." Warren has a panic attack as we transition back to the X-Mansion. Beast and Bobby are playing a game when they see on the news the events that occurred at the bar. Bobby tries to comfort him as the X-Jet flies back into the mansion and what's left of the team regroups. And Rogue immediately goes to hug Bobby as Psylocke catches Hank up on the situation. We jump cut to Gambit waking up with his arm healed as Rogue is crying by his bedside. He tries to use his charm and levity to cheer her up as she feels guilt for hurting him. He goes silent for a bit as he tries to fully process everything Rogue must be going through right now. He asks how long Mystique has been her mom. Rogue explains that Mystique went undercover and posed as her mom after the incident with her boyfriend. She goes to say that Mystique is the only one that freed her from her abusive father, but now she doesn't know what the right thing to be or do. She vents about how much pain she feels due to her feeling like all she can do is hurt people. Gambit rebuttals to this, saying that without her, Kitty would still be under Sinister's control. Rogue continues to doubt herself as she points out that even when saving Kitty, she hurt Remy.
Are you kidding? Me holding the hand of such a beautiful, strong, and kind woman never made me feel more alive. In fact, I would appreciate it if next time you need my kinetic energy, you pull that move you pulled on Cyclops.
Rogue is both flustered and reassured by his comments, and then starts talking about how it felt to hold Remy's hand. She says that she doesn't just absorb energy, but emotions and vague memories. And when she held Remy in her hand, she felt the need to just want to see a smile on everyone's face, and just felt the infinite amount of warmth and love that came from Gambit, and that he's always showing in this harsh world. It's now Gambit's turn to be flustered as he holds her glove hand tight and comments,
Well, that's what being an X-Men will do to you.
We then take a look at Rogue's face. This is the moment she cements herself as an X-Man. The camera pans across the city landscape into the hidden base of Mr. Sinister. Scott keeps screaming to see Charles, but Sinister just laughs this off. Scott lays in tragic defeat as Aurora attempts to get him back on his determined feet. This is also where Raven is able to have a true heart-to-heart with them, as she puts away any of the masks she's been using to hide herself. She admits that despite being ashamed of the direction they took with their lives, she is proud of the strength her pupils have accomplished. She goes on saying that while she hates herself in terms of how she let the X-Men be raised, she wouldn't change a thing about the students she was able to raise. These words are what's able to make Scott calm down and reflect on everything he's been experiencing the past couple of days. We pan up to the top floor where Sinister checks on Eric and Charles. Charles attempts to appeal to Sinister's humanity, which ultimately fails, and he mocks him. Eric, on the other hand, continues to lash out rage on the man that caused so much of his torment. Sinister, in return, just uses his telepathy to make Eric relive so many of his painful memories, as Charles attempts to use his own telepathy to calm down Eric. But Sinister continues to push back on Charles. Sinister then starts singing as he prepares the machine. We pan back to the X-Mansion, where Emma is able to reunite with Kitty and informs her that Lockheed and her family are safe back at home. Goes on saying that she's glad to have her back in her life, and she doesn't know what she would do without them. Bobby takes a look at this friendship and amount of love, as we see on his face just how much he longs for this affection, and this amount of a family that loves him. Laura, on the other hand, just grunts and gets up before walking out of the door, only being stopped when the others ask her where she's going. She says that she needs to go back to Sinister's lab as they don't have much time and cannot waste any of it.
Listen, I know you just got here, but when you an X-Men, we work together. It's the only way forward.
Laura then stops and looks back at this new team of X-Men and breathes in before finally opening up for what seems like the first time in her life. She tells them her origin being that of a girl created with the DNA of an older mutant, having only been created as a weapon. She says that she only got rescued in a way that ended up with her father dying, but as he laid in his final breaths, he told her not to be what they made you. She can reject this human bigotry while saving mutants. It's her calling. The rest of the X-Men take in this tale and create their final preparations as they set off to take down Sinister's lab. Sinister notices them coming and attempts to send out all of his different missiles at them, but Hank and Psylocke pilot the ship expertly to avoid them. They then sacrifice the jet in order to jump out and they split up. Hank, Psylocke, Kitty, and Emma go to find Sinister and destroy his machine, while the rest deal with Sinister's less powerful clones in order to find the rest of the captive mutants. They then are able to run into where the rest of the mutants are being held and free Scott and Storm, but hesitate to free the rest of the Brotherhood. Remy tells the two of them that they need to go up and help the rest of the team as they figure out how to deal with the Brotherhood's fate. After Scott, Aurora, and Wolverine go to deal with them, Toad quickly uses his tongue to reach a part of Sinister's machinery. Once Pyro is freed, he causes an explosion that separates the rest of the team. We get Rogue waking up after the aftermath as Gambit helps her out. Only after Rogue is back on her feet, Remy starts insulting her, calling her weak and nothing more than a scared little girl who could never get over a crush she nearly killed. When Rogue is emotionally stiffened by this, Gambit transforms into Mystique. This is where Gambit and Sabretooth then also appear and they have a 2v2. Meanwhile, Iceman and Pyro finally have their face-off, and Bobby struggles against the more experienced Pyro, but nonetheless he continues to fight in order to protect his newfound family. Once he gets Pyro in a somewhat stable situation, he attempts to immobilize Toad. Once he gets the upper hand on Toad, he tries to come out with something cool before freezing Toad. Unfortunately, however, the only thing he can awkwardly come up with is saying,
You know what happens to the Toad when hit by a snowstorm? The same as everything else.
Pyro then comes up behind him and points out what terrible of a line that was. Bobby pathetically responds with,
Yeah, I know. I thought I should say something cool, but now that I think about it, I could have said something about him being cold-blooded. Oh, wait, I need to continue fighting you.
As they go back to tussling, we pan back to the rest of the X-Men dealing with Sinister. They're struggling with Beast Unleash Anger being the only thing that's able to get hits on him. Well, eventually, Wolverine, Cyclops, and Storm show up to give him a hand. Further helping out the matter is Angel flying in to take his revenge on Sinister. During the brief moment where Sinister is down, these X-Men regroup. Emma, Kitty, and Psylocke go to destroy the machine, while the rest stay back to deal with Sinister. What's left of the original X-Men team look at each other and acknowledge the second chance they have to fully defeat Sinister. Four of them, alongside Wolverine, go full force on Sinister, with Laura happy to finally get her revenge. Kitty is able to phase through Sinister's locks and let the two telepaths in as they start destroying parts of the machine. Gaiwan takes another look at these two young girls bickering and paving a new way forward for mutant kind. Psylocke starts tearing up. When they ask her what's wrong, she simply responds by wiping away her tears and says, "It's nothing, I'm okay. It feels like our future is in good hands." The three of them then come across Charles and Eric and free them. Eric then attempts to mumble to Kitty. He acknowledges the Star David necklace that previously got him so emotional, and he asked her why, after all that our people have gone through, she still helps the X-Men in their bigot toleration. Kitty is taken aback by this question before answering that her family is the best thing that's ever happened to her, and she can't let anyone hurt them. Magneto reflects on this with sincerity before asking, "And just how long do you think it is until they decide to take away your family in the same way they did to mine?" The music slows down before Rogue comes flying in through the wall in order to protect them, as the Brotherhood returns and gives Magneto the energy he needs to fully power and blast everyone away. He uses his magnetic field to fly the Brotherhood up with him as he tears down Sinister's lab. Psylocke and Emma attempt to calm down his mind. They only see destruction and anger, which physically pains the telepaths and makes it impossible for them to control his mind. As Sinister continues to joke about Magneto's temper tantrum, Eric stays silent as he flies the helmet towards him before violently shoving it on the head of Sinister, making it impossible for him to use his telepathic abilities. Everyone else watches in horror as he lifts Sinister up by his head into the air and monologues over the sounds of his screams. "You always talked about creating a perfect specimen, but we all know that's not what you truly care about. You just want to prove that you can get to one-up upon each other. You enjoy seeing people suffer as they cry into your shoulder, hence why you search for power. I will admit, I do search for power, but not to rise above people, but to create a world where everyone is equal. I will take as many bigots down as I need to in order to make it work. But after 30 years of trying, not to mention the decades I spent suffering in a lab for your content, I see humans have no more choice, and it's only a matter of time until their extinction. I'm just speeding up the process. I will never let myself see my people be wiped away. Never again! He then pushes the magnetic fields on the helmet till it fully crushes Sinister's head and throws it into the burning metal. Charles attempts to calm down Eric, but Eric simply reaffirms that he's too late, and it's time to show mankind what they're made of. The shield of Brotherhood metal floats over the city. Kitty, Angel, and Storm are the only X-Men able to get into this flying chunk of metal, as the rest of them rush over to the city in order to manage the damage. Eric gives his speech that fully reveals mutants to humans, as tons of news crews and people on the ground look up. It feels like the entire world is watching Eric's speech, and you can tell he's wanted this. He then rains hell down on the city as the X-Men use their skills to help people. We cut back to Kitty, Angel, and Storm attempting to fight back against the Brotherhood, with Aurora being the main dominant force against them. Angel goes up against Magneto, while Magneto points out that after all Warren has gone through, he should have no reason to fight with the X-Men. Kitty notices this and stands up to Eric, stating that Eric is correct and assuming the worst of humanity. But just because something is broken just doesn't mean it can't get better.
Humans will fear us, especially after everything that's happened. But we do enough good for this planet, and even if some horrible people are incapable of change, we can change the way others look at them. I am Jewish. I am a mutant, and I'm not afraid to use it for the best. This is what you were blind to, Eric, and this is what makes me an X-Men.
This speech given by Kitty is heard within the communications of all the X-Men as they are fully inspired. Cyclops takes this message deep inside his heart, then hears Jean's voice and her hand on his shoulder. He's finally able to get rid of all the weight that comes with his PTSD and lead the X-Men into what she would have wanted. He further uses his powers to save civilians and fight back against Magneto's Brotherhood. Still, Magneto's anger is just too powerful, and they all come to terms with the fact they need something more to neutralize his energy field. They look over to Rogue, as they know she could have what it takes to fully disrupt Magneto's force. She's still too afraid to use the full power of her mutations.
Listen here, Cher. Every time I look at you, I see the passion that rides off you and the kindness you make. You are an X-Men, and nothing can change that. You focus on everything you love, everything you've experienced, and mold it into the things you wish to protect. The family you never got, that boy that made you regret the pals you got, and all the little gals like you, that if you do this, you will be able to show them that they aren't alone and they have a true chance in this world.
Rogue then pushes back her tears as she feels the love and power that radiates off the bodies of these X-Men and flies up gracefully into the magnetic energy field. She avoids all obstacles and goes straight into it, causing the Brotherhood to land on the ground and Sinister's tech to be fully engulfed in Rogue's power. The Brotherhood all land on the ground and the X-Men confront them. All the citizens watch, including Warren's family, as Magneto acknowledges the X-Men's victory in battle. It says the war has officially begun and no amount of brainwashing will change that. Brotherhood then fly away into the distance as the X-Men are left to deal with the collateral damage. Charles begins to give a big speech about how they only mean peace. But as he starts making the speech, he realizes that there's not much he can change in the way people see them, but he can inspire the future of X-Men. He then gestures to the OG X-Men of Cyclops, Storm, Beast, and Angel as he lets them give their speech to the people. We then pan away to see 3 weeks later, as we see Charles giving a proper interview. In this interview, he fully comes out as a mutant and says what the X-Men are. He acknowledges that only now he knows what he needs to be. Not a leader for mutant battles, a teacher for gifted youngsters. He then fully announces the opening of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and he hopes to be welcomed by the rest of humanity. But no matter what, he will protect the future of mankind. We pan out to see Brotherhood watching this as Eric laments that he didn't think Charles had it in him. Raven then asks him what their next mission will be, and Magneto says that that's up to her, because while proud of the Brotherhood, can't stay on it. Mystique is the only leader that could fully bring them to greatness. I need to find the true source of power to forge a brighter future, and I'm afraid I cannot find it on this planet. He then looks up to the stars and collects his things before flying up. I will be back when the time needs me. Good luck, my friend, my family. Mystique and the rest of the Brotherhood then emotionally watch as he connects himself to an asteroid and floats up to space. It then transitions to Xavier's higher populated school as classes finally start. Emma, Kitty, Bobby, and Laura all meet up and ask if they're ready for the future, which they all nod and head into their classes. In the basement of the school, however, Scott takes a look at that picture of the first class of X-Men as he finally takes it down and puts it away. In replacement, he puts up the picture of the current lineup. Cyclops, Storm, Beast, Angel, Psylocke, Gambit, and Rogue. They all get in the X-Jet as they're asked what their mission is. Scott and Aurora explain how in Russia there's currently a mutant battle going on between a locked-up super soldier mutant, a man of iron, and his little sister with a sword. They then all look at each other. The jet blasts off and credits roll. The post-credit scene shows an abandoned Sinister lab as the shadow of a very strong figure breaks in. Once in the lab, a hologram of Sinister appears. Oh my good friend, if you have seen this, it means the very unlikely situation where I die has been fulfilled. Granted, I obviously still got my clones, but as mentioned in our eternal bond, those clones can only be brought back to life by you. The lights in the lab turn on to reveal the tons and tons of frozen Sinister clones. And of course, we can't forget my other test subjects, with one being my personal favorite creation. The large blue hand on the man reveals the label of his favorite creation. The label reads, Test name, Madeline Pryor. Base name, Jean Grey. As the large man starts laughing in gratitude at this, he exclaims, It's now time to bring on the apocalypse. That's my pitch! I hope you enjoyed it. My next scripted video, not the video I'm working on about why I love Deadpool 2 so much, and I'm also working on a video about why The Marvels is such an underrated MCU movie. But that's all we have for today. Thank you so much. The next Mutant Saga project probably won't come in a while as I want to work on those other projects first. I'm happy to announce that the next Mutant Saga project will be the Unbelievable Gwenpool. See you later. I would really appreciate it if you shared this video and stuff and help it in the algorithm. Bye!